The marble floor of the Grand Whitmore Hotel was cold enough to bruise. Ariel Dawson knew that because her backpack hit it hard. Books, pencils, and a battered notebook scattering like evidence of a crime she didn't commit. Grant Hale stood over her, 6 feet of wool suit and contempt, his polished shoe inches from her library copy of The Secret Garden. "Executive floor," he'd said, voice sharp as broken glass. "Not a daycare." Nobody moved to help. Not the concierge, not the bellhop, not even the woman in pearls who'd smiled at Ari 10 minutes earlier. The message was clear. Girls like her didn't belong here. But what Grant Hale didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in less than 2 hours, this 12-year-old girl would walk into the most important negotiation in the hotel's history and become the only person in the building who could save it. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next changed everything. The Grand Whitmore Hotel didn't just occupy the corner of 5th and Lexington, it owned it. 15 stories of limestone and crystal chandeliers, doormen in brass-buttoned coats, and a lobby that smelled like money and imported roses. It was the kind of place where power brokers closed deals over $30 cocktails, and celebrities slipped through side entrances to avoid cameras. The kind of place where people like Monica Dawson entered through the service door at 6 in the morning and left 12 hours later smelling like bleach and other people's perfume. And it was the kind of place where her daughter absolutely, positively, was not supposed to be visible. Ariel Dawson, Ari to everyone except the school attendance office, had the rules memorized. Stay in the northwest corner of the lobby. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with guests. If someone in a suit looks at you, pretend you're waiting for someone important. Don't eat anything that crinkles. Don't spread out. Don't exist louder than a whisper. She followed those rules every day after school while her mother finished the second shift that paid for their apartment in Queens, the one with heat that worked most of the time and neighbors who didn't ask too many questions. Ari would sit in the stiff-back chair near the potted ficus, backpack between her feet, library book open on her lap, and watch the world that wasn't hers spin by in Italian leather and silk scarves. Today's book was The Secret Garden. She'd read it twice already, but there was something about Mary Lennox, prickly, invisible, unwanted, that Ari understood in her bones. She was halfway through the part where Mary discovers the hidden door when she felt it, the prickling awareness of being watched. She didn't look up right away. That was another rule. Eye contact invited interaction, and interaction invited trouble. But the presence didn't move. Slowly, Ari lifted her gaze. A man stood 10 feet away, mid-50s, silver hair combed back like a movie villain, charcoal suit so sharp it could cut glass. He wasn't looking at her the way most guests did, with vague irritation, the way you'd notice a stain on expensive upholstery. He was looking at her like she was a problem that needed solving. Grant Hale, Senior Vice President of Guest Relations. Ari knew his name because her mother had warned her about him on day one. "Mr. Hale doesn't like messes," Monica had said quietly, tying her work shoes in the dim light of their kitchen. "And he thinks people like us are messes." Now Grant Hale was walking toward her, and every instinct in Ari's body screamed, "Run." But running would make it worse. Running would make her mother's job harder. So she closed her book carefully, sat up straighter, and tried to look like someone who had every right to be there. "Excuse me," Hale said. His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice used to giving orders that weren't questioned. "Are you a guest of this hotel?" Ari's throat went dry. "My mom works here." "That's not what I asked." "No, sir. I'm waiting for her to finish her shift." Hale's expression didn't change, but something tightened around his mouth. "The employee break room is on sublevel 2. That's where you wait." "There's no—" Ari stopped herself. There was a break room, technically, a windowless box with flickering fluorescent lights, a vending machine that ate quarters, and a table sticky with ancient coffee rings. Her mother had told her to stay upstairs because the basement felt like a trap, because she wanted her daughter to breathe air that didn't smell like failure. "There's no what?" Hale's voice sharpened. "Nothing, sir. I'll go." "No, you'll leave. This is the executive floor, not a daycare." Heat flooded Ari's face. She stood slinging her backpack over one shoulder, and that's when it happened. The zipper, already half broken, gave up completely. Books tumbled out, pencils clattered. Her notebook, the one where she practiced Japanese Sign Language vocabulary, skidded across the marble and came to rest near Hale's perfect shoe. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then Hale stepped back as if her things might contaminate him. "Clean this up," he said. Not to her, to the air, to the staff he expected to materialize and handle the mess. And make sure she understands the employee entrance is on West 47th. She and her mother can use that from now on. Then he walked away. Ari dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she gathered pencils and crumpled papers. Around her, the lobby continued its polished rhythm. A couple in tennis whites laughed near the elevator. A bellhop pushed a brass cart stacked with Louis Vuitton luggage. The woman in pearls who'd smiled earlier now studied her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Nobody helped. Nobody even paused. Ari shoved everything back into her backpack, clutching it closed with both arms, and stumbled toward the hallway that led to the service stairs. Her eyes burned, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could see. She made it to the stairwell before the first tear fell. 14 floors above the lobby, Vivian Cross was losing the most important deal of her career, and she knew it. The CEO of the Grand Whitmore stood at the head of the executive conference table, tablet in hand, watching her carefully constructed partnership die in real time. Across from her sat Kenji Sato, founder and principal of Sato Technologies, a software empire worth $3.2 billion and growing. He was 48, sharply dressed, and utterly, completely deaf, which wouldn't have been a problem if Vivian's team had done their jobs. "Where," Vivian said, voice dangerously calm, "is the interpreter?" Her chief operating officer, Marcus Lang, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Cancelled. Family emergency. The agency is sending a backup, but what, Marcus?" "Traffic. Bridge closure. They're saying 45 minutes. Vivian glanced at the clock, then at Kenji Sato, who sat perfectly still, dark eyes patient but cooling by the second. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Yuki, was typing furiously on her phone, but her expression said everything. This is a disaster. 45 minutes, Vivian repeated. We have 15 before the press briefing. 15 minutes to finalize terms on a partnership that affects 600 jobs, a 10-year revenue model, and the entire future positioning of this company. We could use the app, someone suggested. The AI translation, no. Yuki's voice cut across the room like a blade. She looked up from her phone, and her polite smile didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Sato requires Japanese Sign Language interpretation for all formal negotiations. Not an app, not automated text. A qualified human interpreter. We understand, Vivian said quickly, and we apologize. This is unacceptable. Yuki translated in crisp, formal JSL. Sato's response was brief. Mr. Sato appreciates your apology, Yuki said, but respect is not shown through apologies. It is shown through preparation. The room went silent. Vivian had spent 18 months courting this partnership. 18 months of calls, presentations, site visits, and carefully negotiated terms. Sato Technologies wanted to build a flagship smart hotel system, and the Grand Whitmore was their proof of concept, the showcase property that would launch the platform globally. The deal was worth $1.2 billion over 10 years. It would save the Whitmore from the slow death of declining revenue and rising competition. It would prove Vivian's leadership to a board that still whispered she was too young, too aggressive, too female. And it was falling apart because nobody had triple confirmed the interpreter. Marcus, Vivian said quietly, go downstairs. Find the backup, personally. I don't care if you have to drag them out of a cab. Marcus bolted. Vivian turned back to Sato and Yuki, forcing confidence into her spine. We will resolve this. I give you my word. Yuki translated. Sato watched Vivian for a long moment, then signed something slow and deliberate. Mr. Sato says words are easy, Yuki said. Action is what matters. Vivian nodded. Understood. But as the clock ticked past 3:47 p.m., she had no idea what action could possibly save this. In the third-floor break room, Monica Dawson was elbow-deep in cleaning chemicals when her supervisor found her. "Monica, you seen your kid?" Monica straightened, heart lurching. "She's in the lobby. Why?" "Hale kicked her out, said she was loitering on the executive floor." The bottle of surface cleaner slipped from Monica's hand. "He what?" "Said she needs to use the service entrance. Told her to go home." Monica was moving before the sentence finished. She stripped off her gloves, tossed her apron onto the counter, and headed for the stairs. Her supervisor called after her. Something about shift coverage, about protocol. But Monica didn't stop. She found Ari in the stairwell between the second and third floors, sitting on the cold concrete steps with her broken backpack clutched to her chest. "Baby," Monica dropped to her knees, hands framing Ari's face. "What happened?" "I'm sorry." Ari's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to. He said I didn't belong and my bag broke and everyone just..." "Stop!" Monica pulled her daughter close, feeling the tremor in her thin shoulders. "You didn't do anything wrong. He said we have to use the other door now." "I don't care what he said." But that was a lie, and they both knew it. Monica cared. She had to care. One complaint to HR, one bad review, one executive who decided she was more trouble than she was worth, and they'd be back to job boards and overdue rent notices. "Come on," Monica said gently. "Let's get you home." "What about your shift?" "I'll tell them I had an emergency." Monica managed to smile. "Because I did. You're my emergency." Ari nodded, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. They stood together, Monica steadying her daughter with one arm, and started down the stairs toward the service exit. They made it 2 floors before they heard the voices. "Complete nightmare. Doesn't understand English or the app or anything that's not 45 minutes. We'll be lucky if he doesn't walk." The voices were coming from the 14th floor hallway, sharp with panic. Monica slowed, instinct telling her to stay invisible, but Ari had stopped completely. "Mom," she whispered, "that's the executive conference room." "So?" "So they're talking about an interpreter." Ari's eyes widened. "They need a Japanese sign language interpreter." Monica's stomach dropped. "Ari? No. I could... Absolutely not. But I know JSL. I've been studying for 2 years. You're 12 years old." Monica gripped Ari's shoulders. "Those people are not your friends. That man who just humiliated you downstairs, he works up here. This is not our world. But if they need help, they don't need help from us. They need help from professionals. People they'll actually listen to." Monica's voice softened. "Baby, I know you want to fix this, but some doors aren't meant for us." Ari looked at the hallway, then at her mother, and something in her expression broke Monica's heart, because it was the same look Monica saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who knew exactly how small the world thought she was and hated it. "Okay," Ari whispered. They continued down the stairs in silence. At 4:02 p.m., Marcus burst back into the conference room, alone and sweating. "Accident on the bridge," he gasped. "Complete standstill. The backup can't get here in time." Vivian closed her eyes. Across the table, Yuki murmured something to Sato. He nodded once, then stood. "Wait," Vivian started, but Sato was already moving toward the door, Yuki at his side. He paused at the threshold, turned back, and signed something brief. "Mr. Sato thanks you for your time," Yuki said, "but he does not do business with organizations that do not value communication." "Please," Vivian said, hating the desperation in her voice. "Give us one more chance, 30 minutes. If we can't find someone..." Sato cut her off with a sharp gesture. Then he signed again, longer this time, and Yuki's expression turned pitying. "Mr. Sato says in his community, people wait years to be heard. He will not reward a company that makes him wait 15 minutes. Then they were gone. The conference room emptied in a wave of murmurs and shifting blame. Vivian stood alone at the head of the table, staring at the contract that would never be signed, the partnership that would never launch, the future that had just walked out the door. Her phone buzzed. The board chair. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Vivian picked it up, saw the subject line, emergency session called, and felt the floor drop out from under her. She had 90 minutes before they voted her out. Go on. Ari and her mother made it as far as the service exit before Ari stopped. I have to use the bathroom. Monica sighed. Can you wait until we get to the subway? No. Fine. Make it quick. Ari ducked into the single-stall restroom near the loading dock, locked the door, and leaned against the sink. Her reflection stared back, frizzy braids, red-rimmed eyes, a thrift store sweater with a hole in the sleeve. People like us are messes. She turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face, and tried to breathe. That's when she heard it. Through the wall, thin, institutional, probably not up to code, voices carried from the break room next door. Interpreter never showed. Sato walked. Vivian's finished. Ari pressed her ear to the wall. I'm serious. They're calling an emergency board meeting. If she can't fix this in the next hour, she's out. What's she supposed to do? Learn sign language? Bitter laughter. At this point? Maybe. Ari's heart hammered. She thought about the vocabulary notebook in her backpack. 2 years of library books, YouTube videos, and online JSL courses. 2 years of practicing in the mirror, signing conversations with herself because she didn't have anyone else. She wasn't fluent, not even close, but she knew formal business JSL. She knew how to introduce herself, how to apologize, how to ask clarifying questions. She knew enough to maybe, possibly, buy them time. Some doors aren't meant for us. Her mother's words echoed. But Ari thought about Vivian Cross, who she'd seen once in the lobby, walking fast and focused like she had a hurricane inside her. She thought about the 600 jobs the staff had whispered about. She thought about her mother, scrubbing toilets on the 3rd floor, while men like Grant Hale decided who belonged. And she thought, what if the door is open, and I'm the only one who sees it? Ari unlocked the bathroom, slipped into the hallway, and ran. She found the executive conference room by following the sound of panic. The door was cracked open. Through it, Ari could see Vivian Cross pacing like a caged wolf, phone pressed to her ear. I understand that, Richard, but if you give me 1 hour, no, I'm not making excuses. Ari knocked. Vivian spun, irritation flashing across her face. Not now. Then she saw Ari, really saw her, 12 years old, out of breath, backpack clutched in both hands. How did you get up here? Vivian demanded. I can help. The words tumbled out. With Mr. Sato, I know Japanese Sign Language. Vivian stared. Then, incredulously, you're a child. I'm 12, and I've been studying JSL for 2 years. Studying? Vivian's voice rose. This is a billion-dollar negotiation, not a school project. I know formal business JSL, Ari interrupted. Greetings, apologies, questions. I know how to ask someone to repeat something or slow down. I'm not perfect, but I'm here. Vivian looked at her phone, then at the empty table, then back at Ari. Where are your parents? My mom works here. Housekeeping. Something shifted in Vivian's expression. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. What's your name? Ariel Dawson. Ari? Ari. Vivian said it slowly, like she was testing the weight of it. Do you understand what you're offering? Yes, ma'am. If you get this wrong, you'll humiliate yourself in front of some of the most powerful people in this industry. If I don't try, you'll lose everything. Silence stretched between them. Then Vivian made a decision that would change both their lives. Marcus! She shouted. Her COO appeared in the doorway, took one look at Ari, and froze. Vivian, please tell me you're not... Find Kenji Sato. Tell him we have an interpreter. Bring him back. You can't be serious. Do it. Now. Marcus looked at Ari, then at Vivian, then fled. Vivian turned back to Ari, and her voice dropped to something almost gentle. If you do this, she said, there's no halfway. You're either good enough or you're not. And if you're not, I can't protect you from what happens next. Ari met her eyes. I know. Then let's find out what you're made of. When Kenji Sato returned to the conference room, he was not expecting a 12-year-old girl. He paused in the doorway, Yuki beside him, and his expression was unreadable. Vivian stood at the head of the table, Ari next to her, and the air felt thin enough to shatter. Mr. Sato, Vivian said. This is Ariel Dawson. She has offered to interpret for us. Yuki's eyebrows rose. She murmured something to Sato, who tilted his head slightly, studying Ari. Then he signed, "How old are you?" Ari's hands moved before her brain could catch up. 12 years old. Sato blinked. Around the room, the executives who'd filtered back in went silent. Sato signed again, faster. "Where did you learn JSL?" "Library, internet." "Books." Ari signed back. Then carefully, "I'm not professional, but I will try my best." A ghost of a smile touched Sato's mouth. He signed something longer, more complex, and Ari's pulse spiked. She caught maybe 70%, something about respect and time and trust. She took a breath and signed. "Can you please repeat, slower?" Sato did. This time, Ari understood. "Respect is not about perfection," he'd said. "It is about effort." Ari's hands trembled as she signed back. "I will give all my effort." Sato held her gaze for a long moment. Then he sat down, and the negotiation began. The first 5 minutes were the hardest of Ari's life. Vivian started with the basics, a review of the partnership terms they'd already agreed upon in principle, revenue sharing, timeline, implementation phases. Straightforward business language that Ari had studied in her notebooks, but never actually used with a living, breathing person who was risking everything on her accuracy. She stood beside Vivian's chair, hands visible, trying to remember everything she'd learned about formal JSL. Keep your signing space consistent. Face the person you're interpreting for. Don't add your own opinions. Don't guess. If you don't understand, ask. Vivian said, "We propose a 60-40 revenue split on the smart hotel platform, with the Whitmore retaining operational control of guest services." Ari's hands moved, translating the concept into signs. She stumbled slightly on operational control, had to fingerspell it, but Sato nodded understanding. He signed back, and Ari's stomach clenched. He was fast, not impossibly fast, but faster than the practice videos she'd watched. She caught most of it, but there was a sign she didn't recognize, something about authority or autonomy. She wasn't sure. "Mr. Sato asks..." Ari paused, then signed to him. "Please repeat last part." Sato did, slower this time, and Ari saw it clearly. Decision-making authority. "Mr. Sato asks about decision-making authority," Ari said to Vivian. "He wants to know who has final approval on system updates and modifications." Vivian glanced at Ari with something that might have been surprise or might have been hope. Joint approval. Any significant changes require sign-off from both parties. Ari translated. Sato considered, then signed again. "He says that's acceptable," Ari said, "but he wants the definition of significant changes specified in writing." Agreed. They continued. Question and answer, term and clarification, Ari's hands moving in the space between two worlds. Her fingers ached. Her shoulders burned. Sweat gathered at the small of her back, but she didn't dare shift her weight or show discomfort. Across the table, Grant Hale sat with his arms crossed, watching her like she was a bomb about to detonate. Other executives whispered behind their hands. Marcus kept glancing at the clock like he expected the universe to correct this absurdity at any moment. But Sato was engaged. More than that, he was present in a way he hadn't been when Yuki was trying to use the translation app. His questions grew more detailed, more probing. He asked about staff training, about privacy protocols, about what happened if the technology failed during a high-profile event. And Ari kept up. She didn't get everything perfect. Once she confused the sign for guarantee with promise and had to backtrack. Another time, she completely blanked on the sign for proprietary and had to fingerspell it twice before Sato understood. But each time she made a mistake, she owned it immediately, asked for clarification, and kept going. 20 minutes in, Vivian called for a brief break. Sato nodded and stood, stepping out into the hallway with Yuki. The moment the door closed, the room erupted. "This is insane," Grant Hale said, voice tight with fury. "We're conducting a billion-dollar negotiation through a child who's doing better than anyone else in this room could." Vivian cut him off. "She's not certified. She's not bonded. If she mistranslates something critical, then we'll deal with it. But right now, she's the only reason Sato is still in this building. You're risking everything on a janitor's kid who learned some signs from YouTube? The room went cold. Vivian rose slowly from her chair, and her voice dropped to something that could freeze blood. Finish that sentence, Grant. I dare you. Hale's jaw worked, but he stayed silent. That janitor's kid, Vivian continued, has more professionalism and courage in her 12-year-old body than you've shown in 20 years of executive posturing. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit there quietly, and you're going to let her work. And if I hear one more word of complaint from you, I'll have security escort you out, and you can explain to the board why you sabotaged this deal. Are we clear? Hale's face flushed red, but he nodded. Vivian turned to Ari, and her expression softened. You're doing great. How are you holding up? Ari's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. I'm okay. You don't have to lie to me. I'm scared I'll mess up something important. Then you'll mess up, and we'll fix it. That's how this works. Vivian pulled out a chair. Sit. Drink some water. Breathe. Ari sat. Someone, Marcus surprisingly, slid a bottle of water across the table to her. She drank, and the cold helped clear her head. Can I ask you something? Vivian said. Yes, ma'am. Why are you doing this, really? Ari thought about the lobby, about Grant Hale's shoe near her scattered books, about her mother's face in the stairwell. She thought about all the times she'd been invisible, background noise, a problem to be managed. Because I can, she said simply, and because nobody thought I could. Vivian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. The door opened. Sato and Yuki returned, and the negotiation resumed. But something had shifted. Sato was watching Ari differently now, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. And when they reached the section on implementation timeline, he did something unexpected. He signed directly to Ari, not as a message to pass along, but as a question for her. You are student? Ari hesitated, glancing at Vivian, who nodded permission. Yes. Ari signed back. 7th grade. Why learn JSL? Ari's hands moved slowly, carefully. I wanted to understand people who are not heard. Sato's expression changed. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. He signed something else, longer this time, and Ari felt the weight of every eye in the room on her. In my language, Sato signed, there is a saying, the quietest voice often carries the most truth. I think you understand this. Ari's throat tightened. She nodded. Sato turned back to Vivian and signed a question that made Ari's pulse spike. Does she stay for whole negotiation? Mr. Sato wants to know if I'm staying for the entire negotiation, Ari translated. Yes, Vivian said immediately. If you're willing. Sato signed again, and this time there was something almost playful in his expression. He says good, Ari translated, because the hard part is coming. And Sato was right. The next section dealt with control and equity, the heart of the partnership, the part where egos and billions of dollars collided. Vivian proposed that the Whitmore maintain 51% control of the joint venture, with Sato Technologies holding 49%. Ari translated. Sato's response was immediate and sharp. He says no, Ari said, and the room tensed. He says... She paused, making sure she had the signs right. He says he will not be a minority partner in his own technology. Either it's equal partnership or there is no partnership. Vivian leaned back in her chair. Equal partnership means equal decision-making. What happens when we disagree on direction? Ari translated. Sato signed back, quick and precise. He says disagreement is not failure, Ari said. It's conversation. But conversation requires respect, and respect requires equality. Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably. This was the sticking point they'd been dancing around for months, the question of who really controlled the future they were building together. Grant Hale leaned forward. Tell him we need operational control to protect our brand integrity. Ari translated, but Sato's response was blistering. He says... Ari faltered, then pushed through. He says your brand integrity is not more valuable than his life's work. He says if you cannot trust him as an equal, you do not trust him at all. Silence crashed through the room. Vivian stared at the table, and Ari could see her calculating revenue, board votes, risk assessment, pride. Then Vivian looked up at Sato, and something in her face changed. She looked tired, real, human. "You're right," Vivian said quietly. Hale started to protest, but Vivian raised a hand, cutting him off. "You're right," she repeated, and Ari translated with hands that had stopped shaking. "Equal partnership. 50-50. Joint decision-making with a mediation clause if we reach an impasse. Your technology, our venue, shared risk, shared reward." Sato watched her carefully as Ari's hands moved. Then he signed something that made Yuki's eyebrows rise. "What did he say?" Vivian asked when Ari didn't immediately translate. Ari swallowed. He said that's the first time in this entire process anyone has spoken to him like a partner instead of a vendor. The words landed like stones in still water. Vivian held Sato's gaze. "Then I apologize for taking this long to get it right," Ari translated. Sato nodded slowly. Then he signed again, and Ari felt something electric move through the room as she interpreted. "He says we have a deal, pending legal review and contract finalization, but the partnership is agreed in principle." Vivian exhaled, and it sounded like she'd been holding her breath for 18 months. "Thank you." But Sato wasn't finished. He signed something else, longer and more complex, and Ari had to ask him to repeat part of it before she could translate. "He says," Ari's voice caught, "he says the deal is agreed on one additional condition, that the interpreter who made this possible is compensated fairly and credited publicly." Every head in the room turned to Ari. "He doesn't mean me," she said quickly. "He means the professional interpreter when they—" Sato cut her off with a sharp gesture, then signed directly to her. "I mean you." Ari's hands hung frozen in the air. "You came when no one else could," Sato continued. "You were honest about your limits. You did not pretend to know what you did not know. You treated me like a person, not a problem. That is worth more than certification." Ari's voice cracked. She signed back, fumbling. "I am not professional." "Professional means you get paid," Sato signed, and there was humor in his expression now. "So we will pay you, then you will be professional." Vivian leaned forward. "What's he saying?" Ari translated, barely believing the words coming out of her mouth. "He wants me compensated," she said, "as the official interpreter for this negotiation." "Done," Vivian said immediately. "But I'm 12, and you just saved 600 jobs in a billion-dollar partnership. I think we can figure out the paperwork." Vivian pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. "Marcus, draft an independent contractor agreement. Rush it to legal. I want it ready in an hour." Marcus looked like he'd been hit with a brick, but he nodded and left the room. Sato signed something else, and Ari had to bite her lip to keep her composure as she translated. He says when the press conference happens tomorrow, he wants me on stage, interpreting his statement to the media. Grant Hale exploded. "Absolutely not. We'll have a certified interpreter by then." Sato's hands moved in a cutting gesture, and his expression went cold. He signed to Ari, and she translated in a voice that barely shook. "He says if I am not there, he is not there. He says you can have a certified interpreter standing by for legal protection. But I'm the voice he chooses." The room held its breath. Vivian looked at Ari. "Can you do it?" "I don't know," Ari admitted. "A press conference is different. There will be questions I can't prepare for, vocabulary I don't know. So we'll prepare you. Tonight, tomorrow morning, you'll have every resource this hotel can provide." Vivian's voice was fierce. "But only if you want to do it. This is your choice, Ari. Not mine. Not his. Yours." Ari thought about the lobby where she'd sat invisible for 6 months. She thought about her mother, scrubbing floors while men in suits decided her daughter didn't belong. She thought about Mary Lennox finding the hidden garden, and about all the doors that were supposed to be closed to people like her. And she thought about Sato, who had seen her, really seen her, and decided she was worth trusting. "I'll do it," she said. Sato smiled. A real smile, warm and approving. He signed something brief, and Ari translated. He says, "Welcome to the partnership." The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later with handshakes and promises of contract drafts by morning. Executives filtered out, some congratulating Vivian, others studiously avoiding eye contact with Ari. Grant Hale left without a word, his face a thundercloud. Sato approached Ari before leaving. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small and silver, a pin shaped like a bridge, delicate and geometric. He signed, "In my company, we give these to people who build connections. You have built something important today." Ari took the pin with trembling hands. "Thank you." Sato signed something else, and Yuki stepped forward to interpret since the formal negotiation was over. "Mr. Sato says you have a gift," Yuki translated, "not just for language, but for listening. He hopes you will not let anyone convince you that gift is small." Then Sato bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that made Ari's chest ache, and left. The conference room emptied until only Ari and Vivian remained. "Sit down," Vivian said gently, "before you fall down." Ari sat. Her legs felt like water. Vivian pulled up a chair across from her. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Are you okay? Really?" "I think so. I don't know. My hands won't stop shaking." "That's adrenaline. It'll pass." Vivian paused. "Where's your mother?" The question hit Ari like cold water. "Oh God, she's going to kill me." "Why?" "Because she told me not to do this. She said this wasn't our world, and I ran up here anyway." "You saved this hotel. You saved my career. You saved 600 jobs. I think she'll forgive you." "You don't know my mom." Vivian smiled. "Then let's go find her together. I'd like to meet the woman who raised someone brave enough to walk into the scariest room in the building and change everything." They found Monica on the 8th floor, stripping beds in a suite that probably cost more per night than she made in a week. When she saw Ari walk in with Vivian Cross, her face went through about 6 emotions at once: relief, confusion, fear, and something that looked like the beginning of anger. "Ariel Maria Dawson," Monica said, and Ari knew from the full name usage that she was in trouble. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere." "It's my fault," Vivian interrupted. "Mrs. Dawson, I'm Vivian Cross. Your daughter just did something extraordinary, and I need to explain." Monica's eyes narrowed. "What kind of extraordinary?" So Vivian told her the whole story, the canceled interpreter, the dying deal. Ari walking into the conference room with her broken backpack and impossible offer. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't make it sound easier than it was. She told Monica that her 12-year-old daughter had stood in front of billionaires and executives and interpreted a partnership that would shape the future of the hotel. And she told her that Ari was going to be paid for it. Monica listened in silence, one hand gripping the edge of the bed she'd been stripping. When Vivian finished, Monica turned to Ari. "Is this true?" "Yes, ma'am." "You walked into an executive meeting without permission." "Yes, ma'am." "You offered to interpret a business negotiation despite having no professional training." "Yes, ma'am." Monica was quiet for so long that Ari's heart started to hammer. Then her mother did something unexpected. She laughed. It started as a choked sound, almost like a sob, then grew into real laughter that shook her shoulders. She pulled Ari into a hug so tight it hurt. "You're grounded," Monica said into Ari's hair. "For a month, maybe 2. "Okay. And also, I'm so proud of you I could burst." "Okay." Monica pulled back, wiping her eyes. She looked at Vivian. "My daughter is going to be paid for this work. A real contract. A fair rate." "Absolutely," Vivian said. "I'll have my legal team draw it up. And Mrs. Dawson, I'd like to talk to you as well about your position here." Monica stiffened. "Are you firing me?" "God, no. I'm promoting you. You raised a daughter who saw a crisis and ran toward it instead of away. That's leadership. And this hotel needs more of that, especially in management. I clean rooms. You could train people, supervise staff, help us rebuild a culture where employees aren't afraid to solve problems." Vivian's voice was firm. "I can't undo what happened in the lobby today, but I can make damn sure it never happens again. And I'd like your help doing that." Monica looked at Ari, then back at Vivian. "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need, but the offer stands." They talked for a few more minutes. Logistics, schedules, the press conference tomorrow. Then Vivian left, and it was just Ari and her mother in a hotel suite that smelled like lemon polish and new beginnings. "You scared me," Monica said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize for being brave. Just warn me next time before you change the world, okay?" Ari nodded. They finished the shift together, Monica stripping beds while Ari folded towels, both of them processing what had just happened. It felt surreal, like a dream that might evaporate if they talked about it too much. But when they left through the service entrance that night, the security guard nodded at them with something new in his expression: recognition. Not as problems to be managed, but as people who belonged. It was a small thing, but small things, Ari was learning, could build bridges. The next morning arrived too fast and with too much coffee. Ari had slept maybe 4 hours, her brain spinning through JSL vocabulary and possible questions, and the 1,000 ways she could fail in front of cameras and reporters. Monica had made her breakfast, eggs and toast, which Ari barely tasted, and now they were back at the Whitmore, climbing the stairs to the 14th floor. But this time, they used the main elevator. Vivian met them in her office, which was all glass walls and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than their annual rent. She had dark circles under her eyes, but looked energized, focused. "Good. You're here. We have 2 hours before the press conference. Let's get you ready." The next 90 minutes were a blur of preparation. Vivian had brought in a JSL consultant, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who was deaf and had interpreted for corporate events for 20 years. She wasn't there to replace Ari, but to coach her. "Pace yourself," Dr. Kim signed, her hands precise and elegant. "If Sato signs too fast, ask him to slow down. If you don't know a sign, fingerspell it clearly. The worst thing you can do is guess." "What if I freeze?" Ari asked. "Then you take a breath, apologize, and ask for repetition. Professionals do it all the time. Perfection is not the goal. Communication is." They practiced. Dr. Kim played Sato, firing questions at Ari in rapid JSL while Vivian watched, making notes. Business terminology, technology vocabulary, questions about implementation and privacy, and the future of smart hotels. Ari stumbled. A lot. But each time Dr. Kim stopped her, corrected her hand position, or clarified the sign, and they started again. "You're doing well," Dr. Kim said during a break. "Better than some professionals I've seen. Your fundamentals are strong." "Really?" "Really. You listen before you translate. That's the most important skill." At 10:45, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you." The press conference was being held in the Whitmore's Grand Ballroom, a space designed to make people feel small and impressed at the same time. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled rows of chairs, notebooks, and phones ready. At the front of the room, a stage held a podium, a table with microphones, and 2 chairs. Ari's stomach tried to escape through her throat. "Breathe," Vivian murmured beside her. "You've got this." Sato was already on stage, seated at the table with Yuki standing slightly behind him. When he saw Ari, he smiled and gestured to the empty chair beside him. Ari climbed the steps on legs that felt borrowed from someone else and sat down. The room quieted. Vivian stepped to the podium, and her voice carried across the ballroom with practiced ease. "Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Today, the Grand Whitmore Hotel is proud to announce a groundbreaking partnership with Sato Technologies that will revolutionize the hospitality industry." She talked for 5 minutes, outlining the partnership, the technology, the vision. Professional, polished, perfect. Then she stepped aside. "And now, I'd like to invite Kenji Sato, founder and CEO of Sato Technologies, to share his perspective. He'll be interpreted today by Ariel Dawson." Cameras swiveled to focus on Ari. Her mouth went dry. Sato stood and moved to the podium. He looked out at the crowd of reporters, then at Ari, and signed, "Ready?" Ari's hands moved in response. "Yes." And Sato began. His hands moved with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of fighting to be understood. Ari watched, her heart hammering as Sato signed his opening statement, and she forced herself to breathe, to focus, to translate the meaning behind the motion. 20 years ago, Ari spoke as Sato's hands painted the words in the air. I built my first communication system because I was tired of being treated like I had nothing to say. Not because I was incapable, but because the world was not built to hear me. The reporters leaned forward, pens moving across paper, phones recording every word. Sato continued, and Ari found her rhythm, her voice growing steadier with each sentence. Technology should not replace human connection. It should enhance it. The partnership we are announcing today is built on that principle. Smart systems that learn what guests need before they ask. Interfaces that adapt to different languages, different abilities, different ways of being in the world. A reporter near the front raised her hand, and Vivian nodded permission. "Mr. Sato," the woman called out, "why did you choose the Grand Whitmore for this partnership? There were other hotels with larger prestige, bigger markets." Sato's hands moved in response, and Ari translated without hesitation now, her fear burning away in the heat of purpose. Because yesterday, when every system failed and every backup plan fell apart, someone at this hotel saw a problem and chose to solve it instead of managing it. That is the culture we want to build. Not perfection, but courage. Cameras flashed. Another hand went up. "Is it true that a child interpreted yesterday's negotiation?" a man asked, his tone carrying just enough skepticism to make Ari's skin prickle. Sato's expression didn't change, but something sharp moved through his signing. "The person who interpreted yesterday's negotiation," Ari translated, her voice clear and deliberate, "is sitting beside me. Her age is irrelevant. Her skill, her honesty, and her courage are what mattered, and those qualities do not require a birth date to be valid." The room erupted in murmurs. More hands shot up, but Sato raised his own, requesting patience, and continued signing. "In my community," Ari translated, feeling the weight of every word, "we spend our lives proving we are capable of things the hearing world assumes we cannot do. We are told we cannot lead businesses, cannot drive cars, cannot live independently. We are underestimated constantly. So when I meet someone else who has been underestimated, I recognize them immediately. And I choose to bet on them, because I know what they will do when given a real chance." Ari's voice wavered slightly on the last sentence, but she pushed through. Beside her, Sato's hand stilled, and he looked at her with something that felt like solidarity. Another reporter stood, a young woman with sharp eyes and a recorder held high. "Mr. Sato, some critics have expressed concern about privacy issues with smart hotel systems. How do you respond?" Sato signed his response, and Ari noticed he'd slowed his pace slightly, making sure she could catch every nuance. "Privacy is not negotiable," Ari translated. "Every system we build includes override controls, opt-out options, and transparent data policies. Technology should serve people, not surveil them. Any company that forgets this will eventually lose the trust they need to survive." The questions came faster after that, a barrage of inquiries about implementation timelines, market expansion, competitive advantages. Ari kept pace, stumbling only once when a reporter used the phrase algorithmic optimization, and she had to ask Sato to wait while she fingerspelled it for him. He nodded understanding, answered, and they continued. 30 minutes in, Ari's shoulders ached and her hands felt heavy, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop, because Sato was trusting her, and the room was listening, and for the first time in her life, being invisible wasn't an option. Then Grant Hale stood up. He was in the back of the room, arms crossed, his expression carved from ice. When he spoke, his voice cut through the professional atmosphere like a blade. "Mr. Sato, with all due respect, this is a billion-dollar partnership that will affect hundreds of employees and thousands of guests. Don't you think it's irresponsible to rely on an uncertified interpreter, regardless of her personal story? What happens when she makes a critical error? Who is liable?" The room went silent. Ari's hands froze halfway through translating a previous answer. She looked at Grant Hale, then at Sato, and felt something cold settle in her stomach. He was right. She wasn't certified. She had no professional credentials, no insurance, no legal protection. One mistake, one misunderstood sign, and she could destroy everything. But Sato was already signing, and his movements were sharp, controlled, angry. Ari's voice shook as she translated. "The question you are asking is not about certification. It is about trust. You're asking why I would trust someone young, someone unproven, someone who does not fit your definition of professional." Hale's expression hardened. Sato continued, his signing growing more emphatic, and Ari felt power thrumming through every gesture. I have worked with certified interpreters who treated me like a problem to be processed. I have sat in meetings where professionals translated my words accurately, but stripped away my meaning, my emotion, my humanity. Certification does not guarantee respect. It guarantees paperwork. Ari's voice grew stronger as she translated, feeding off Sato's conviction. Yesterday, this young woman walked into a room where she did not belong, knowing she would be judged, knowing she might fail, and offered to help anyway. She admitted what she did not know. She asked for clarification when she was unsure. She treated me like a person, not a liability. That is professionalism. That is integrity. And I will take honesty over credentials every single time. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras swiveled. Grant Hale's face went scarlet, but before he could respond, Vivian stepped to the podium. I think we have time for one more question, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. A reporter near the middle stood, an older man with kind eyes and a weathered notebook. This question is for Ariel. How did you learn Japanese Sign Language and why? Ari blinked. The question was for her. Not translating someone else's words, but speaking her own. She glanced at Sato, who signed, Answer him. Your story matters too. Ari turned back to the crowd and felt every camera lens focusing on her like spotlights. Her mouth was dry, but she made herself speak. I learned from library books and YouTube videos, she said. My mom works 2 jobs, so we don't have money for classes. But I wanted to understand people who communicate differently. I wanted to know what it felt like to be heard in the language that makes sense to you, not the language that's convenient for everyone else. Her voice steadied as she continued. I'm not an expert. I make mistakes, but I try really hard to get it right because I know what it feels like when people don't listen. When they look through you like you're furniture or a problem or something that doesn't matter. And I think everyone deserves better than that. The room was completely still. So I learned JSL because I wanted to build bridges, Ari finished. And yesterday, I got to use one. The older reporter smiled and sat down. Vivian thanked everyone for coming, and the press conference ended in a wave of flash photography and excited conversation. Reporters swarmed toward the stage, but security moved in smoothly, creating a corridor for Sato and Ari to exit. Backstage, in a small prep room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs, Ari finally let herself collapse. She sat down hard, her whole body shaking with delayed reaction. Sato sat across from her, Yuki translating since the formal interpretation was over. You did well, Yuki said, voicing Sato's signs. Better than well. You have a gift for this. I almost froze when Mr. Hale asked that question, Ari admitted. Sato signed something, and Yuki's expression softened as she translated. He says, fear is proof you understand the stakes. Only fools are fearless. The brave are the ones who are terrified and do it anyway. The door opened and Monica burst in, still wearing her housekeeping uniform because she'd run straight from the 6th floor. She pulled Ari into a hug that smelled like cleaning solution and safety. I watched on the monitor in the break room, Monica said, her voice thick. Baby, you were incredible. I was scared the whole time. I know, I could see it, but you didn't let it stop you. Monica pulled back, framing Ari's face with her hands. You know what you just did? You showed every person in that room that being underestimated is not the same as being incapable. You changed the story. Vivian entered next, followed by Marcus and several other executives, but Grant Hale was noticeably absent. Where's Hale? Marcus asked, echoing Ari's thought. Gone, Vivian said, and there was satisfaction in her voice. I had security escort him out during the Q&A. He's done. You fired him? Marcus looked shocked. Vivian, he's been with this company for 15 years, and in 15 years, he learned nothing about leadership, respect, or recognizing talent when it's standing right in front of him. Vivian's voice was steel wrapped in silk. He tried to sabotage this partnership because his ego couldn't handle being wrong. That's not the culture I'm building here. She turned to Ari and her mother, and her expression softened. I meant what I said about the promotion, Mrs. Dawson. I want people who see solutions instead of problems. People who know what it's like to fight for a seat at the table. People like you. Monica glanced at Ari, then back at Vivian. What would the job actually be? Director of Staff Development. You'd oversee training programs, workplace culture initiatives, and employee advancement opportunities. You'd report directly to Marcus and have a team of 3 to start. The salary is $85,000 plus benefits and performance bonuses. Monica's hand found Ari's shoulder and gripped tight. $85,000. That was more than double what she made now. That was health insurance and savings, and maybe, possibly, a future that didn't involve choosing between rent and groceries. I don't have a college degree, Monica said quietly. You have something better. You have lived experience and perspective we desperately need. The degree requirement is waived. Vivian smiled. Besides, your daughter just proved that credentials aren't everything. Maybe it's time we started practicing what we preach. Monica looked at Ari, and Ari nodded. Because this was it. The door opening wider, the world rearranging itself into new patterns. Okay, Monica said. Yes, I'll take it. Vivian's smile grew. Excellent. Marcus will handle the paperwork. You start Monday. The room erupted in congratulations, but Ari barely heard them. She was watching her mother's face, seeing the disbelief and hope and fierce joy warring in her expression, and feeling something unlock in her own chest. They'd done it. Not just survived, but won. Sato stood and approached Monica, signing something formal and respectful. Yuki translated. Mr. Sato says he is honored to work with a family that understands what it means to fight for belonging. He says your daughter has made this partnership stronger, and he looks forward to seeing what other impossible things she will accomplish. Monica's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. Tell him thank you. And tell him we won't let him down. Yuki translated. Sato bowed slightly, then turned to Ari and signed directly to her. What will you do now? Ari thought about it. About the lobby where she used to hide, about the library books that taught her signs, about the future that had seemed so small and fixed, like a photograph she could never step into. She signed back. Keep learning, keep building bridges. Sato's smile was warm and approving. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Ari. My personal contact, Yuki translated as Sato signed. When you are older, if you want to work in accessibility technology or interpretation services, call me. We can always use people who understand both the language and the why behind it. Ari took the card with trembling hands. It was heavy stock, embossed letters, the kind of thing important people carried, and now she had one. Thank you, she said, signing it simultaneously. The meeting broke up shortly after. Executives filtered out, discussing press coverage and social media metrics and next steps. Monica was pulled aside by Marcus to discuss start dates and team introductions, and Ari found herself alone with Vivian in the quiet prep room. Can I ask you something? Vivian said, sitting down in the chair Sato had vacated. Yes, ma'am. What are you going to do with the money from the interpretation contract? Ari hadn't thought about it. The number Marcus had mentioned, $5,000 for the negotiation and press conference, felt imaginary, like monopoly money that couldn't possibly be real. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe save it for college. That's smart, but I want you to do something else first. Vivian leaned forward. I want you to buy something frivolous, something that has nothing to do with responsibility or the future or being practical, something that's just for you, just for joy. Why? Because you just changed your life and your mother's life and 600 other people's lives. And you did it by being brave in a moment when you could have stayed invisible. That deserves celebration, not just savings accounts. Vivian's voice softened. You're 12 years old, Ari. You're allowed to be a kid, even when you're doing extraordinary things. Ari thought about the library books she always returned on time because late fees were impossible. The thrift store clothes she wore without complaint. The birthday parties she'd stopped getting invited to because everyone knew she couldn't reciprocate. I want a new backpack, she said suddenly. A good one, with a zipper that works. Vivian laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Then get the best damn backpack you can find. And if anyone asks where you got it, you tell them you earned it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Ari asked the question that had been burning in her mind since yesterday. Why did you let me try? Really? You could have lost everything. Vivian considered the question carefully. Because I was losing everything anyway. and because there's something about watching someone take a risk that makes you remember you're supposed to take them too. She met Ari's eyes, and because when I saw you standing in that doorway, terrified but offering to help anyway, I saw myself 20 years ago, younger than everyone else, underestimated, desperate to prove I belonged. I wanted to be the person who opened the door for someone like me, because I remember every person who slammed it in my face. Did you know I could do it? No, but I knew you believed you could, and sometimes that's enough. Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. Come on. Your mother's probably wondering where you are. They found Monica in the hallway outside, talking with Marcus about team structures and training budgets. When she saw Ari, she broke off mid-sentence and crossed the space between them in 3 strides. You good? Monica asked, searching Ari's face. Yeah, I'm good. Because if you're not, we can leave right now. We can go home and eat ice cream and pretend today was a weird dream. Ari smiled. I'm good, Mom. Really? Are you? Monica pulled her close, and Ari felt her mother's heartbeat through the thin fabric of her uniform. I'm terrified, Monica admitted quietly. I'm excited and grateful and completely terrified that I'm going to screw this up. You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because you taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it matters. Monica laughed, the sound shaky but real. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. People just didn't notice. They left the Grand Whitmore together that afternoon, not through the service entrance, but through the main lobby. The same lobby where Ari had scattered her books across marble floor, where Grant Hale had made her feel like trash that needed removing. But now the concierge nodded at them. The bellhop smiled. The woman in pearls who'd ignored Ari yesterday actually stopped and said, Congratulations, I saw the press conference. You were remarkable. Ari thanked her, and they kept walking, mother and daughter, toward a future that had rearranged itself overnight. Outside, the December air was sharp and clean. Traffic roared past. Street vendors called out their wares. The city moved around them in its endless, indifferent rhythm, and Ari realized something profound. The world hadn't changed, but her place in it had. We should celebrate, Monica said as they headed toward the subway. Dinner somewhere nice, your choice. Ari thought about fancy restaurants with cloth napkins and prices that made her mother's face tighten. She thought about proving they belonged in those spaces now, about using their new circumstances like armor. But what she said was, Can we go to Rosa's and get pupusas, and then go to the bookstore? Monica smiled, relief and love mixing in her expression. Yeah, baby, we can do that. So they rode the subway to Queens, squished between commuters and students, and ate pupusas at the Salvadoran restaurant where the owner knew their names and the salsa was always perfect. Then they walked 3 blocks to the independent bookstore that smelled like old paper and possibility. Ari found a book on advanced JSL, thick and expensive and full of technical vocabulary she'd need for the future she was building. Monica bought it without hesitation, along with a novel Ari had been eyeing for months and a blank journal with a leather cover. For your thoughts, Monica said, handing her the journal, so you can write down what this feels like, the scary parts and the good parts, because someday you're going to want to remember. That night, in their apartment with the heat that worked most of the time, Ari sat at the kitchen table and opened the journal. She stared at the blank first page for a long time, trying to find words big enough to hold what had happened. Finally, she wrote, 2 days ago, I was invisible. Today, I was seen. Tomorrow, I will make sure other people are too. It wasn't poetry, it wasn't profound, but it was true, and truth was enough. Across the table, Monica was reading through paperwork for her new position, making notes in the margins, her face equal parts terrified and determined. She looked up and caught Ari watching. What? Monica asked. Nothing, just, I'm proud of you. Monica's expression softened. I'm proud of you too, baby. So damn proud. They sat together in the warm kitchen light, 2 people who'd spent years being overlooked, finally stepping into the visibility they'd earned. And in the morning, the real work would begin. The press coverage hit like a tidal wave. By the next morning, Ari's face was on 3 major news sites, accompanied by headlines like 12-year-old interpreter saves billion-dollar deal, and The Invisible Voice, how one girl changed everything. Her inbox, an email address she'd created for school projects, filled with interview requests, congratulatory messages, and a few cruel comments about kids who didn't know their place. Monica read through them over breakfast, her expression darkening with each new message. "People are awful," she muttered, deleting a particularly nasty comment about child labor laws. "Some people," Ari corrected, "but look at this one." She turned the laptop to show an email from a deaf advocacy organization, asking if Ari would consider speaking at their youth conference about accessibility and representation. Another from a university professor researching informal language acquisition. 3 from parents of deaf children, thanking her for showing their kids that bridges could be built in both directions. "Those are the ones that matter," Ari said. Monica nodded slowly. "You're going to have to make choices now. About what opportunities to take, what to say no to. This is going to follow you." "I know. Are you ready for that?" Ari thought about the question seriously. Was she ready for her life to be different? For people to recognize her, to have expectations, to watch and judge and measure her against the impossible standard of the girl in the headlines? "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm going to try anyway." Monday arrived with new routines and old anxieties. Monica started her position as Director of Staff Development, which meant early mornings and late nights, and a learning curve steep enough to give anyone vertigo. She came home exhausted but energized, full of stories about training programs and cultural audits, and the slow, difficult work of changing how an organization saw its own people. Ari went back to school, where everything was exactly the same and completely different. Her classmates had seen the news coverage. Some were impressed, others were jealous. A few were cruel in the way that 12-year-olds could be, making jokes about teacher's pet and show-off that landed like small cuts. But Ari had stood in front of billionaires and cameras and survived. Middle school gossip felt manageable by comparison. She joined the school's ASL club, which met on Thursdays after classes. Most of the other students were beginners, learning basic signs for a language credit. But the teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, was deaf, and when she learned what Ari had done, her eyes lit up with recognition. "You are the girl from the news," Ms. Rodriguez signed. "Yes," Ari signed back. "I hope that's okay." More than okay, it is inspiring. Ms. Rodriguez became Ari's mentor after that, meeting with her once a week to practice advanced vocabulary and discuss the nuances of interpretation. She connected Ari with local deaf community events, introduced her to professional interpreters, and quietly began building a network that would support Ari's unusual path forward. "You have something special, Ms." Rodriguez said one afternoon, Ari translating her signs into speech and back again as practice. "Not just skill, respect. You understand that language is not just words, it is culture, identity, soul." "I'm still learning," Ari said. "Good. Never stop. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you become useless." 3 weeks after the press conference, Vivian called Ari into her office at the Whitmore. The hotel had transformed in small but significant ways. New training programs for staff, sensitivity workshops, a revised mission statement that included words like inclusion and accessibility and actually meant them. Grant Hale's replacement was a woman in her 40s who'd worked her way up from front desk agent and understood exactly what it meant to be underestimated. Ari sat in the same chair where she'd first offered to interpret, and Vivian slid a folder across the desk. "Open it," Vivian said. Inside was a formal offer letter. Not for interpretation services, but for something bigger. Youth Accessibility Consultant for the Whitmore-Sato Partnership. A paid position, part-time, with responsibilities that included reviewing proposed technologies for user-friendliness, consulting on staff training materials, and serving as a liaison to deaf and disability communities. "I'm 12, Ari said, staring at the letterhead. "And you've already proven you can do work that matters. This is real, Ari. Real responsibilities, real compensation, real impact. But only if you want it." Ari read through the offer carefully. 10 hours a week, $15 an hour. Flexible scheduling around school. Direct reports to both Vivian and Sato's accessibility team lead. It was everything she'd been working toward without knowing she was working toward it. "Yes," Ari said. "I want it." Vivian smiled. Then welcome to the team. Again. They spent the next hour going over expectations and boundaries and the thousand small details of turning a miracle into a system. When Ari finally left, she carried the signed offer letter in her new backpack, sturdy navy canvas with reinforced zippers and her initials embroidered on the front pocket, and felt like she was carrying proof that impossible things could become permanent. The future was still terrifying, still uncertain, still full of people who would underestimate her, doubt her, try to put her back in the box labeled invisible. But Ari had learned something crucial in that executive conference room, something that Grant Hale's cruelty had accidentally taught her. The people who tell you that you don't belong are usually just afraid that you do. And she was done being afraid of belonging. 6 months later, Ari stood in the Grand Whitmore's newly renovated technology center and watched her idea become real. The space had once been a dusty storage room on the second floor, full of broken furniture and outdated convention supplies. Now it gleamed with touchscreens, adjustable height workstations, and interfaces designed for multiple languages and accessibility needs. Visual fire alarms pulsed in the corners. Braille labels marked every door and station. Voice-to-text and text-to-voice software ran seamlessly in the background, translating conversations in real time. It was the first fully accessible guest services center in any major hotel in the city, and it had been Ari's suggestion during her third consulting meeting with Sato's design team. "If we're building smart technology," she'd said back in February, hands moving through the signs as she spoke, making sure Sato could follow along, "shouldn't the people using it represent everyone who will actually need it? Not just hearing people, not just English speakers, everyone." The lead designer, a woman named Patricia Chen, had looked skeptical. "That's ambitious. The compliance costs alone," but Sato had cut her off with a sharp gesture, signing directly to Ari. "Explain more." So Ari had explained about how technology that worked for disabled people usually worked better for everyone, about how designing for the margins meant nobody got left behind, about how a hotel that truly welcomed all guests would need staff who understood accessibility wasn't an accommodation, but a baseline. Sato had listened, asked questions, and then made a decision that changed the entire project scope. "We build it," he'd said through Yuki's interpretation. "Exactly as Ari described, this becomes our pilot program." Now, 6 months later, the center was opening to the public, and reporters had gathered once again to document what the partnership had built. Ari watched from the side as Vivian cut the ribbon, as guests tested the interfaces, as deaf community members smiled with genuine appreciation instead of polite tolerance. Miss Rodriguez was there, along with 3 of her former students who'd been hired as accessibility consultants. Monica stood near the back in her new business suit, no longer in a housekeeping uniform, watching her daughter's vision become concrete and steel. A hand touched Ari's shoulder. She turned to find Dr. Sarah Kim, the JSL consultant who'd coached her before the press conference, smiling with warm approval. "You did this," Dr. Kim signed. "Sato did this," Ari signed back. "I just suggested it." "No. You saw what was missing and you spoke up. That is leadership. That is power." Dr. Kim's hands moved with emphasis. "Do you know how many meetings I have sat in where people design for us without us? Where they assume they know what we need? You changed that pattern. You insisted we be in the room." Ari felt heat climb her cheeks. "I'm still learning." "Good. Stay that way. The dangerous ones are the people who think they have finished learning." The opening reception lasted 2 hours. Ari spent most of it translating conversations between guests and staff, helping test the new systems, and answering questions from reporters about what came next. A journalist from a disability rights magazine pulled her aside for a longer interview. "How does it feel," the journalist asked, "to have this much influence at 13? Ari thought about the question carefully. She'd turned 13 in March, celebrated with pupusas at Rosa's and a small party with her ASL club friends. The number felt arbitrary, like it shouldn't change anything, but adults seemed to think it mattered. "It feels like responsibility," Ari said finally. "Like I have to get it right because other people are watching, and if I mess up, it might close doors for someone else. That's a lot of pressure." "Yeah, but it's also opportunity, and I'd rather have pressure and opportunity than be invisible again." The journalist nodded, making notes. What advice would you give to other young people who see problems they want to solve? Ari glanced across the room at her mother, who was deep in conversation with 3 staff members about training protocols. Monica caught her eye and smiled, and Ari felt the familiar surge of gratitude and determination. Start where you are, Ari said. You don't have to wait until you're older or more qualified, or until someone gives you permission. If you see something that's broken and you know how to fix it, speak up. The worst thing that happens is someone says no. But if you don't try, the answer is already no. And if people underestimate you, let them. Their underestimation is not your limitation. Prove them wrong with your work, not your arguments. The journalist smiled. You sound like someone who's had practice with that. I have, and I'll probably need more. People don't stop underestimating you just because you succeed once. You have to keep showing up. After the reception ended and the reporters left, Vivian gathered the core team in her office. Ari, Monica, Marcus, Patricia Chen, and Yuki, representing Sato, who was traveling in Tokyo. They sat around the conference table where Ari had first translated the partnership terms, and the full circle moment wasn't lost on anyone. We have a problem, Vivian said, and the room tensed. A good problem, but still a problem. We've received inquiries from 43 other hotels asking about the Accessibility Center model. Tech conferences want Sato to present. Disability advocacy groups want to partner. We're being held up as the example, which means we can't afford to fail. What do you need from us? Marcus asked. Expansion, standardization, a way to scale this without losing the heart of what makes it work. Vivian looked at Ari. Which brings me to you. Sato wants to create a formal youth advisory board for the partnership. 5 to 7 young people with disabilities or accessibility expertise who can consult on design, test systems, and make sure we're not building in a vacuum. He wants you to help recruit them. Ari's pulse jumped. Me? You know what to look for. You understand the difference between tokenism and real inclusion, and you have credibility in communities we're trying to reach. Vivian leaned forward. This would be a bigger time commitment. Maybe 15 hours a week during the summer, 10 during school. More travel to other properties as we expand, more visibility. Are you interested? Ari looked at her mother. Monica's expression was complicated. Pride mixed with worry, mixed with the kind of protective love that wanted to shield her daughter from every possible harm. What do you think, Mom? Ari asked. Monica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think you're 13 years old, and you've already done more than most adults accomplish in a lifetime. I think you deserve to just be a kid sometimes, but I also think you're going to say yes whether I want you to or not, because this is who you are. Is that a bad thing? No, baby. It's a terrifying thing, because I can't protect you from the world anymore. You're already in it, changing it, and all I can do is make sure you don't lose yourself in the process. Monica turned to Vivian, and her voice took on the steel that had carried her from housekeeping to leadership. If Ari does this, we need clear boundaries. School comes first. Her mental health comes first. The moment this starts hurting her instead of helping her, we stop. And she gets paid what she's worth, not some reduced rate because she's young. Agreed, Vivian said immediately. We'll put it all in writing. And Ari, you can say no at any time. This opportunity will matter, but it's not the only opportunity you'll ever have. Ari thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, sitting in the lobby with a broken backpack, trying to be invisible. That girl would never have imagined this conversation, this room, this choice. But she wasn't that girl anymore. I want to do it, Ari said, but I need help. I can't do this alone. You won't be alone, Patricia said. You'll have a team, support, resources. We're building the structure around your vision, not expecting you to hold it up yourself. And you'll have me, Monica added, every step, even when I'm scared, especially when I'm scared. They spent the next hour mapping out the advisory board structure, recruitment strategies, compensation packages, meeting schedules, and decision-making protocols. Ari contributed ideas, asked questions, and felt the weight of real power settling on her shoulders, not the kind that came from titles, but the kind that came from being listened to. When the meeting ended, Monica and Ari walked out together into the spring evening. The city was soft with twilight, the air finally warm enough to skip jackets. They stopped at a food cart for kebabs and ate them walking toward the subway, just like they used to when money was tighter and the future was smaller. "You okay?" Monica asked. "I think so. Are you?" Terrified, proud, exhausted, excited. Monica smiled. "The same as always, basically." They walked in comfortable silence for a block, then Ari said, "Do you miss it? The old job, I mean, when things were simpler." Monica considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity. Clock in, clean rooms, clock out. No decisions that affect other people's lives. No pressure to be anything except reliable." She paused. "But I don't miss feeling invisible. I don't miss the way people look through me like I was part of the furniture. And I definitely don't miss worrying that one bad day would mean we couldn't make rent. Was it worth it? Everything that happened? Baby, you saved 600 jobs, built an accessibility center, and changed how a billion-dollar company thinks about inclusion. You think I'm going to say that wasn't worth it? But it was hard. It's still hard. The best things usually are." Monica stopped walking, turning to face Ari fully. "You want to know what I really think? I think you were never going to be the kind of person who could stay invisible. It's not in you. So the question was never whether you'd end up doing something big. It was whether you'd have support when you did. And now you do. You have me, you have Vivian, you have Sato, you have a whole community of people who see you and value you. That's the difference. You're not alone anymore." Ari felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I'm glad you're not invisible either." "Me too, baby. Me too." The advisory board recruitment took 3 months and involved more interviews than Ari had thought possible. They received over 200 applications from young people across the country. Deaf teens, wheelchair users, people with visual impairments, neurodivergent kids, chronic illness warriors, and more. Each application told a story of fighting to be included, to be heard, to be treated like they mattered. Ari read every single one. She sat in the Whitmore's small conference room with Patricia and a rotating group of consultants, reviewing applications and conducting video interviews. Some applicants were polished and professional, clearly coached by parents or teachers. Others were raw and real, speaking from the heart about what accessibility meant to them. One application stood out immediately. Devin Martinez was 15 from Los Angeles and had been using a wheelchair since a car accident at age 9. His application essay was blunt to the point of poetry. "I'm tired of people designing ramps that are too steep and calling it accessible. I'm tired of inspirational stories that treat my existence like a lesson for able-bodied people. I want to build things that work, not things that make people feel good about themselves. Hire me if you're serious. Ignore me if you're not." Ari flagged the application immediately. During his video interview, Devin was exactly as advertised, sharp, skeptical, and unwilling to accept easy answers. "Why should I believe this isn't just another corporate diversity initiative that'll disappear in a year?" he asked, arms crossed. "You shouldn't," Ari said honestly, "not based on promises. But you can judge us on what we've already built. The Accessibility Center is real. The training programs are real. The commitment is backed by contract and budget. We're not perfect, but we're trying to do more than perform allyship. Prove it. Come visit, test the systems yourself, interview staff. If you think we're full of it, tell us to our faces and walk away. But if you see potential, help us make it better." Devin studied her through the screen, then said, "You're the kid from the news, the interpreter." "Yeah." "That was pretty badass." "Thanks. Your essay was pretty badass too." Devin's expression cracked into a smile. "All right, I'll come visit, but I'm bringing my own measuring tape for those ramps." "Good. We need people who'll hold us accountable." They selected 7 advisory board members in the end. Devon from Los Angeles, a deaf poet from Chicago, a blind programmer from Seattle, a girl with cerebral palsy who designed adaptive gaming controllers, twin brothers with autism who consulted on sensory-friendly spaces, and a 16-year-old with chronic illness who'd built an app for tracking medical appointments. Each brought expertise, experience, and the kind of sharp honesty that came from living in a world not built for them. The first advisory board meeting happened in July, and it was chaos in the best possible way. 7 teenagers with strong opinions, deep expertise, and zero patience for corporate nonsense gathered in the Whitmore's conference room and proceeded to tear apart every assumption the design team had made. They criticized interfaces that looked accessible but weren't. They called out language that was condescending. They pushed back on timelines that didn't account for community feedback loops. Ari watched it unfold with something close to joy. This was what she'd wanted, not polite consultants who rubber-stamp decisions, but real people with real stakes demanding real change. It was messy and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. During a break, Devin rolled up beside her, eyebrows raised. Your design team looks traumatized. They'll survive. This is good for them. You sure? That one woman looks like she's having an existential crisis. Ari glanced at Patricia, who was indeed staring at her laptop like it had personally betrayed her. She's realizing that accessibility is harder than she thought. That's the first step to actually getting it right. You're kind of ruthless, you know that? I learned from the best. Ari smiled. Besides, you're the one who suggested we scrap the entire mobile interface and start over. Because it sucked. The font scaling doesn't work with screen readers. The color contrast fails WCAG standards. And the navigation is confusing as hell. You want me to lie about that? No, I want you to keep doing exactly what you're doing. Devin studied her for a moment. You're really serious about this, aren't you? This isn't some college essay project for you. This is my life, and it's yours too. We deserve spaces that work for us, not just for the people who designed them. Damn straight, Devin grinned. All right, I'm in. Let's burn it all down and build something better. The second half of the meeting was even more productive, with the team taking detailed notes on every piece of feedback. By the end, they had a revised timeline, a new design approach, and a commitment to involve the advisory board in every stage of development. Yuki, attending on behalf of Sato, looked impressed. Mr. Sato is going to love this. He's always said the best ideas come from the people who'll actually use the product. When's he coming back to New York? Ari asked. Next month. He wants to meet the full advisory board in person. The thought made Ari nervous and excited in equal measure. Sato had been the one who'd trusted her first, who'd seen past her age and lack of credentials to the person underneath. She wanted him to be proud of what they'd built together. After the meeting, as the advisory board members scattered to explore the city or head to their hotels, Ari found herself alone in the conference room with Monica, who'd sat in on the session as part of her staff development work. That was intense, Monica said. Yeah. Good intense or bad intense? Good. Definitely good. Those kids don't pull punches. Would you want them to? Hell no. That's what makes them valuable. Monica started gathering scattered papers and empty water bottles. You know what I noticed? You let them lead. You didn't try to control the conversation or defend the designs. You just listened and took notes. That's the whole point. They're the experts on their own experiences. I know, but a lot of people in your position would have felt threatened by that, would have tried to assert authority or prove they belonged at the head of the table. Monica looked at her daughter with something like wonder. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just remember what it felt like when people didn't listen to me. I don't want to make anyone else feel that way. Monica pulled Ari into a quick hug. That's wisdom, baby, whether you recognize it or not. That evening, Ari video called Sato to debrief on the advisory board meeting. He appeared on screen from his Tokyo office, the city lights glittering through the windows behind him, and his smile was immediate when he saw her. How did it go? He signed. Perfect. They challenged everything. The team is overwhelmed but excited. Ari signed back, speaking aloud simultaneously so her voice-to-text app could create captions. Good. If they were not overwhelmed, you chose wrong people. They want to meet you when you're back in New York. Sato's expression grew thoughtful. I want to propose something. Instead of me coming there, what if the board comes here? To Tokyo. See our main facility, meet our accessibility team, understand the full scope of what we are building. Ari's hands froze mid-sign. That would be amazing. But expensive. Travel for 8 people. Is an investment. These young people are our future consultants, future employees, future partners. I want them to see they are valued, not just useful. I'll talk to Vivian. Already did. She agrees. We coordinate schedules, arrange travel. You come too, yes? With your mother. All expenses paid. Ari felt like her brain was short-circuiting. Tokyo. Japan, a trip she'd never imagined being able to afford, offered so casually it might as well have been a subway ride. I don't know what to say, she signed. Say yes, Sato signed back, his expression warm. Say you will keep building bridges. Say you will keep making people uncomfortable until they build better systems. That is all I ask. Yes, to all of it. Yes. They spent another 30 minutes discussing logistics and vision, Sato sharing plans for global expansion and asking Ari's opinion on everything from hotel design to community partnerships. He treated her like a colleague, like her 13 years of life experience were just as valuable as his decades in business. When the call ended, Ari sat in the quiet of her room and tried to process what her life had become. A year ago, she'd been invisible, background noise in a world that didn't see her. Now she was consulting on international partnerships, building advisory boards, and being invited to Tokyo like it was perfectly normal for a 13-year-old from Queens to help shape the future of accessible technology. It was overwhelming, terrifying, impossible, and she couldn't wait. Monica knocked on her door frame. You okay in here? I heard you laughing. Sato invited the advisory board to Tokyo. All of us, you too. Monica's eyes went wide. Tokyo? As in Japan, Tokyo? As in, we're going to help design the next phase of the partnership, and he wants us to see the headquarters and meet his team Tokyo. Monica sat down on Ari's bed, looking dazed. I've never left the country. I don't even have a passport. We'll get one. Vivian said the company will handle everything. This is insane. Our lives are insane. Ari laughed, the sound bright with disbelief and joy. Yeah, they really are. Monica shook her head slowly, then reached over and pulled Ari close. Promise me something. What? Promise me you'll remember this feeling. Not just the success or the opportunities, but the disbelief. The holy shit is this really happening feeling, because that's the feeling that keeps you humble, that keeps you grateful, that reminds you where you came from. I promise, Mom. I'll never forget. Good. Monica kissed the top of Ari's head. Now go practice your Japanese. If we're going to Tokyo, we're going to be respectful guests. Ari pulled out her laptop and opened a language learning app, adding Japanese to her growing collection of skills. JSL had led to English ASL, which had led to studying international sign languages, which was now leading to spoken Japanese. Each language was another bridge, another way to understand people who lived in different worlds, and Ari was determined to build as many bridges as she possibly could. The Tokyo trip was scheduled for late August, which gave Ari 6 weeks to prepare. She threw herself into learning basic Japanese phrases, researching Tokyo's accessibility infrastructure, and working with the advisory board to develop questions for Sato's team. But she also made time for the normal parts of being 13. She went to the movies with friends from her ASL club. She video called Devin to argue about Marvel movies and adaptive controller design. She helped her mother paint their apartment's living room a warm gold that made the space feel bigger and brighter. One afternoon in early August, Ari returned to the Grand Whitmore's lobby. Not for a meeting or work obligation, but just to sit. She settled into a chair near the potted ficus, the same spot where she used to hide with library books, and pulled out her worn copy of The Secret Garden. She'd read it at least 10 times now, but it still felt right to return to Mary Lennox and her journey from invisible to essential. A young girl, maybe 9 or 10, walked past with her mother. The mother wore a housekeeping uniform. The girl carried a backpack and a library book, and her eyes held the same wariness Ari remembered from her own reflection. Ari watched them settle into chairs across the lobby. The girl opened her book, trying to disappear into the pages. Her mother glanced around nervously, like she expected someone to tell them they didn't belong. Ari stood up and crossed the marble floor that had once felt like enemy territory. Hi, she said, crouching down to the girl's eye level. I'm Ari. What's your name? The girl looked at her mother, who nodded permission. Emma. What are you reading, Emma? Emma held up her book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. That's a good one. I've read it 3 times. Ari smiled. Do you come here a lot, while your mom works? Emma nodded, still cautious. Me too, or I used to. My mom works here, in staff development now, but she used to be in housekeeping. Emma's mother's expression shifted, recognition dawning. "You're Monica Dawson's daughter. I've seen you in the training videos." "Guilty." Ari turned back to Emma. "I used to sit right over there in that same chair you're in, reading books and trying to be invisible. I thought that was safest. But then something happened that showed me being invisible isn't the same as being safe. And sometimes being visible is how you change things." Emma's eyes were wide now. "What happened?" "I helped someone when everyone else said I was too young. And it turned out I was exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Not because I was special, but because I was willing to try." Ari reached into her bag and pulled out a small card, one she'd had made specifically for moments like this. It had her email address and a simple message. "If you see a problem you want to solve, reach out. You're not too young. You're not too anything. You're exactly enough." She handed the card to Emma. "If you ever need help with something, or if you see something that should be better and you want to fix it, email me. I might not have all the answers, but I can try to help you find them." Emma took the card with careful hands, like it might dissolve if she gripped too hard. "Really? Really? And Emma?" Ari leaned in conspiratorially. "The people who tell you that you can't do something are usually just scared that you can. Don't let their fear become your limit." Emma's mother's eyes were shining with tears. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We look out for each other," Ari said simply. "That's how it works." She returned to her own chair, picked up The Secret Garden, and felt something settle in her chest. This was why it mattered. Not the headlines or the partnerships or the opportunities, but the quiet moment of telling another invisible girl that she could choose to be seen, that she had always been worth seeing. The rest of the summer blurred by in preparation and anticipation, and before Ari quite knew how it happened, she was boarding a plane to Tokyo with her mother, 7 other advisory board members, and a future that felt limitless and terrifying in equal measure. The flight to Tokyo was 13 hours of turbulence, terrible movies, and Monica gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles went white. She'd never flown before, never been higher than the observation deck at the Empire State Building, and the reality of hurtling through the sky at 30,000 feet was proving more terrifying than she'd anticipated. Ari held her mother's hand during takeoff and tried not to think about all the ways this trip could go wrong. What if the advisory board hated the Tokyo facility? What if Sato's team thought they were just kids playing at consultation? What if she'd built something that looked impressive from New York, but fell apart under international scrutiny? Devin, sitting across the aisle, caught her expression and signed, "Stop worrying, we got this." Ari signed back, "How do you know?" "Because you don't invite people halfway around the world unless you actually value their input. Sato's not performing, he's investing." The logic helped, but the anxiety lingered through the entire flight, through the landing at Narita, through customs and baggage claim, and the bus ride into the city. Tokyo rose around them in neon and steel, overwhelming and beautiful, a future that had arrived early and decided to stay. Sato met them at the hotel personally, which surprised everyone. He'd brought his full accessibility team, 12 people representing engineering, design, user experience, and community outreach. They gathered in a private conference room that overlooked the glittering Tokyo skyline, and Sato signed a welcome that Yuki translated for the group. "Thank you for coming so far," Yuki voiced as Sato's hands moved. "You are not guests, you are colleagues, and colleagues tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable." The next 3 days were intense in ways Ari hadn't expected. They toured the Sato Technologies headquarters, testing prototypes and interfaces that wouldn't launch for another 2 years. They met with deaf employees who'd helped design the company's accessibility frameworks. They sat in design reviews and weren't afraid to say when something didn't work. And they were listened to. Really listened to. When Devin pointed out that the hotel room controls were positioned too high for wheelchair users, the engineering lead immediately pulled out a tablet and started sketching adjustments. When the deaf poet from Chicago explained that the visual alert system used colors that were hard to distinguish for people with color blindness, the design team didn't defend their choices. They asked for better alternatives. It was collaboration in its truest form, and Ari watched it unfold with something close to awe. On the 3rd day, Sato invited Ari to join him for tea in a quiet garden near the office. Monica came too, at Sato's insistence, and they sat on a wooden bench surrounded by carefully tended maple trees and the soft sound of water moving over stone. Sato signed slowly, giving Ari time to translate for her mother as they went. "I want to tell you a story," he began. "When I started this company 23 years ago, I had one employee and one computer and a dream that probably seemed ridiculous to anyone who heard it. I wanted to build technology that understood people instead of forcing people to understand technology." Monica listened intently as Ari's voice carried Sato's words into the quiet afternoon. "Everyone told me it was too expensive, too complicated, too niche. They said disabled people were a small market, that accessibility was a burden, that I should focus on mainstream products first and add accommodations later." Sato paused, and his expression carried decades of frustration. "But I knew that later never comes. That accommodations added at the end are always worse than design that includes everyone from the start. So I built what I believed in, and I waited for the world to catch up." He looked at Ari directly. "You did not wait. You saw what needed to change, and you changed it. At 12 years old, you walked into a room full of people who had more power and more experience, and you made them better. That is not luck. That is vision." Ari's hands trembled slightly as she translated her own praise. "I am offering you something," Sato continued. "A formal position as Youth Accessibility Director for all Sato Technologies properties and partnerships. You would work part-time during school, full-time in summers, consulting on every new project. You would have a team, a budget, and real authority to reject designs that do not meet accessibility standards." Ari stopped translating, her voice caught in her throat. Monica leaned forward. "What did he say?" Ari found her voice and repeated Sato's offer in English. Monica's eyes went wide. That's a real job. A career position." Sato signed again, and Ari translated mechanically, her brain still processing. "It is a real job with real responsibility. You would report to me and to the head of accessibility, but you would have independence to build the program as you see fit. Starting salary is $75,000 annually, prorated for part-time work during school years, with benefits and travel budget." "$75,000, Monica repeated faintly, "for a 13-year-old. "For the person doing the work," Sato signed firmly. "Age is irrelevant. Value is what matters." Ari looked at her mother, then at Sato, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was what she'd been building toward without quite realizing it, a real career, real influence, real power to shape how technology served the people who needed it most. But it was also overwhelming. She was 13. She still had homework and friendship drama, and moments where she felt like a kid playing dress-up in an adult's world. "Can I think about it?" Ari asked, her hands moving as she spoke. "Of course," Sato signed. "This is not a pressure. This is an offer. You take time, discuss with your mother, decide what is right for you. The position will wait." That evening, Ari and Monica sat in their hotel room overlooking Tokyo's endless lights and talked through the implications. "This is what you want, isn't it?" Monica said quietly. "Not just the job, but the work, the purpose." "Yeah, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of failing, of letting people down, of being the kid who had one good moment and couldn't sustain it." Ari pulled her knees to her chest. "What if I'm not actually good at this? What if yesterday was just luck?" Monica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you remember what happened in that stairwell after Grant Hale humiliated you? You told me to go home, that this wasn't our world." "I did, and I was wrong." Monica's voice was fierce. "I was so scared of you getting hurt that I almost talked you out of the best decision you ever made. I almost let my fear become your limit. You were trying to protect me. I was. But protection and limitation aren't the same thing, and I confused them." Monica reached over and took Ari's hand. "Here's what I know now. You're going to fail sometimes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have moments where you feel like a fraud. That's not a reason to say no. That's proof you're doing something that matters. What if it's too much? What if I can't balance school and work and just being a kid?" Then we adjust. We set boundaries. We say no to some things so you can say yes to others, but we don't say no to everything just because we're scared. Monica squeezed Ari's hand. Baby, I have watched you build bridges for the last year. I have seen you change lives, including mine, and I know in my bones that you're just getting started. So my question isn't whether you can do this. My question is, do you want to? Ari thought about Emma in the lobby, clutching that card like a lifeline. She thought about Devin and the rest of the advisory board, young people who'd spent their lives fighting for scraps of inclusion. She thought about every person who'd been told they were too young, too disabled, too different to have a voice that mattered. And she thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, invisible and aching to be seen. I want to, Ari said. I want to build something that lasts, something that makes it easier for the next person. Then you have my blessing, and my support, and my willingness to fight anyone who tries to underestimate you. Monica smiled, which, let's be honest, is going to happen a lot. Yeah, probably. Good thing you're getting practice dealing with it. The next morning, Ari met with Sato in his office and accepted the position. They spent 2 hours discussing structure and expectations, mapping out the first year of work, and setting boundaries that would protect Ari's education and mental health while still letting her contribute meaningfully. I want to do this right, Ari signed, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. If I fail, it makes it harder for the next young person who wants to do something like this. Sato's response was immediate and emphatic. You are not responsible for every young person's future. You are responsible for your own work, done with integrity. The rest will follow or it will not, but that burden is not yours to carry alone. The relief that washed through Ari was almost physical. She'd been holding herself to an impossible standard, trying to be perfect so she wouldn't close doors for others. But Sato was right. She could only control her own actions, her own effort, her own integrity. When do I start? She signed. You already started, Sato signed back, smiling. A year ago, in a conference room in New York. Everything since then has been confirmation that we chose correctly. The advisory board's final presentation happened that afternoon in Sato Technologies' main auditorium. The entire accessibility team attended, along with department heads, senior engineers, and a handful of journalists who'd been following the partnership's development. Devin went first, presenting their analysis of the hotel room control systems and offering detailed recommendations for universal design improvements. He was confident, technical, and unapologetic about pointing out where the current designs failed. The deaf poet spoke next, sharing how visual communication systems needed to account for cultural and linguistic diversity within deaf communities, not just provide word-for-word translations. Each advisory board member presented their findings, their expertise, their vision for what accessible technology could become if it was designed with disabled people instead of for them. And then it was Ari's turn. She stood at the podium, looking out at an auditorium full of people who were trusting her with something precious, the chance to shape the future of how technology served humanity. Her notes were thorough, her slides were polished, and her hands were shaking. But when she started signing and speaking simultaneously, the shake disappeared. A year ago, Ari began, I was invisible. I sat in hotel lobbies trying not to be noticed, because being noticed meant being removed. I learned to make myself small, quiet, manageable. I learned that people like me, young, poor, the children of service workers, were meant to be background noise in other people's stories. She paused, making eye contact with Sato in the front row. And then someone decided I was worth listening to, not because I had credentials or experience or the right background, but because I had something to offer in a moment when it mattered. That decision changed my life. It changed my mother's life. It changed how I understood my own value. Ari's hands moved through the signs with increasing confidence. But here's what I've learned since then. Being included once isn't enough. Being the exception isn't enough. Being the inspiring story that makes people feel good about themselves isn't enough. Real change happens when inclusion becomes the default, not the exception. When accessibility is the foundation, not the add-on. When people like me aren't remarkable for being here, we're just here, doing work that matters, contributing to something bigger than ourselves. She clicked to her next slide, which showed the Accessibility Center at the Grand Whitmore, alongside photos from disabled communities around the world. The advisory board has spent 3 days testing your systems, asking hard questions, and pushing back on designs that don't work for us. And you've listened, you've revised, you've treated us like experts, not inspiration. That's what real inclusion looks like. Not tolerance, not charity, not inspiration, partnership. Ari's voice grew stronger as she continued. We've prepared a comprehensive report with our findings and recommendations. Some of them are technical, some are cultural. Some are going to be uncomfortable because they require admitting that things you thought were accessible actually aren't. But every recommendation comes from lived experience and expertise. We're not guessing about what disabled people need. We are disabled people telling you directly. She clicked to the final slide, a photo of the full advisory board standing together in front of the Tokyo skyline. This is just the beginning. 7 young people can't represent all disability experiences, all cultures, all needs. But we can be a model for how you build systems that include more voices, how you make consultation meaningful instead of performative, how you design technology that serves everyone, not just the people who've never needed accommodations. Ari looked directly at the audience, and her signs were precise and deliberate. You've invested in us, in our expertise, our time, our vision. Now we're asking you to invest in the larger community we represent. Hire disabled designers, partner with disability organizations, pay consultants fairly. Listen when people tell you something doesn't work, and build systems that make accessibility the default, not the achievement. She stepped back from the podium. Thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being willing to do the hard work of actually changing how technology serves humanity. The auditorium was silent for a beat. Then Sato stood and began to clap, and the entire room followed. The applause wasn't polite or performative. It was genuine, sustained, the kind of recognition that acknowledged real work had been done and real value had been delivered. Ari felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning, and she needed to stay focused. After the presentation, the advisory board fielded questions for 90 minutes. Engineers asked about technical specifications. Designers asked about cultural considerations. Department heads asked about implementation timelines. And the advisory board answered with expertise, honesty, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing their perspectives mattered. When the session finally ended, Sato pulled Ari aside. That was exactly what we needed, he signed. Truth delivered with clarity. No apologies, no softening, just honest assessment and real solutions. Was it too harsh? Ari asked. I don't want to seem ungrateful. Gratitude and honesty are not opposites. You can be thankful for the opportunity and still demand better. That is what leadership looks like. He handed her a folder. Inside is your formal employment contract. Review it with your mother and a lawyer. Make sure you understand everything. If you want to negotiate terms, negotiate. This is a real professional relationship, which means you have every right to advocate for yourself. Ari took the folder with careful hands. Thank you for all of this, for seeing me. I did not give you sight, Sato signed gently. You were always visible. I just chose to look. The flight home was quieter than the flight out. The advisory board members were exhausted but energized, processing everything they'd seen and experienced. Monica slept most of the way, finally relaxed enough to trust the plane wouldn't fall from the sky. And Ari stared out the window at clouds and distance, thinking about what came next. The contract in her bag represented a future she'd never imagined. Financial security, professional recognition, the ability to shape how billions of people experience technology and accessibility. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But more than that, it was proof. Proof that invisible people could become visible, that underestimated people could exceed every expectation, that being young or poor or different wasn't a limitation. It was a perspective that the world needed, whether it knew it or not. When they landed at JFK, New York welcomed them back with humidity and honking horns and the particular chaos of a city that never stopped moving. Ari had only been gone a week, but everything felt different. Or maybe she felt different, and the city was exactly the same. Devin hugged her goodbye at baggage claim. This was incredible. Thank you for making it happen. You made it happen too. We all did. Yeah, but you're the one who started it. You're the one who walked into that room and demanded to be heard. He grinned. Don't forget us when you're running the whole company. I'm 13. I'm pretty sure there are laws against that. Give it time. I'm betting on you. Monica and Ari took the subway home to Queens, carrying suitcases and exhaustion and the kind of satisfied tiredness that came from work well done. Their apartment looked exactly the same, but felt different, like they'd outgrown it slightly during the week they'd been gone. We should move, Monica said suddenly, looking around at the cramped kitchen and the bedroom they still shared. Get a bigger place. Separate rooms. Maybe somewhere with better heat. Can we afford that? Monica smiled. Baby, between my salary and yours, we can afford a lot of things now. The question is, what do we want? Ari thought about it. A bigger apartment would be nice. A bedroom of her own would be incredible. But more than that, she wanted stability, security, the knowledge that one bad month wouldn't destroy everything they'd built. I want to save most of it, Ari said, for college, for emergencies, for the future. Smart. But we can still move somewhere nicer and save. We've earned that. They spent the evening looking at apartment listings online, imagining hardwood floors and windows that actually opened and closets big enough for more than 3 outfits. It felt surreal, this sudden expansion of possibility, like the walls of their world had been pushed back to reveal rooms they hadn't known existed. The next day, Ari returned to the Grand Whitmore for her first official day as Youth Accessibility Director for the Sato Partnership. Vivian had set up a small office for her. Nothing fancy, just a desk and a computer and a door that closed. And Ari spent the morning organizing files and reviewing the advisory board's Tokyo report. Around noon, there was a knock on her door. Come in, Ari called. The door opened and Emma walked in, the young girl from the lobby, clutching the card Ari had given her months ago. Hi, Emma said shyly. You said I could email you if I saw a problem, but I don't have an email address yet, so I just came here instead. Is that okay? Ari smiled and gestured to the chair across from her desk. That's perfect. What's the problem? Emma sat down, her library book still in hand. The kids' area in the lobby doesn't have any books for people who can't read English. My friend Rosa's family speaks Spanish, and she feels bad that there's nothing for her little brother. And there's a boy in my class who's blind, and he told me he never gets to go to hotels because there's nothing for him to do while his parents check in. Ari pulled out a notebook and started taking notes. Those are excellent observations. Have you thought about solutions? Maybe we could have books in different languages, and audiobooks, and things to touch and explore that aren't just looking at stuff? I think those are great ideas. Want to help me make it happen? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Really? I'll need you to research what kinds of books and materials would work best. Maybe interview some kids about what they'd want. Put together a proposal we can present to Ms. Cross. Think you can do that? I can try. Trying is all anyone asks. Ari pulled out a fresh notebook and handed it to Emma. This is your project notebook. Document everything, your research, your ideas, the people you talk to, and we'll meet once a week to check in on progress. Sound good? Emma took the notebook like it was made of gold. Thank you. Nobody ever listens to kids about this stuff. I know. I used to be you, sitting in that lobby, wishing someone would notice. Now I'm in a position to notice, and to help you make the changes you see need making. Ari leaned forward. But Emma, this isn't charity. This is work, real work that matters. I'm expecting you to follow through, to do research, to take this seriously. Can you do that? Yes, I promise. Good. Then welcome to the team. After Emma left, practically floating with purpose, Monica appeared in the doorway. I see you've started recruiting, she said, smiling. Someone told me once that the best leaders recognize talent and give it room to grow. Smart person. The smartest. Ari stood and hugged her mother. Thank you for everything, for believing in me, even when it was scary, for letting me try. You made it impossible not to believe in you, baby. You just kept proving everyone wrong. They stood together in Ari's small office, mother and daughter, two people who'd been invisible for so long they'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But visibility, Ari had learned, wasn't something granted by others. It was something claimed, fought for, earned through the patient work of showing up and speaking up and refusing to disappear. Over the next 6 months, Ari settled into her dual roles as student and youth accessibility director. She worked 15 hours a week during the school year, consulting on new hotel properties, reviewing design proposals, and managing the advisory board's expanding portfolio of projects. Emma's multilingual kids area launched in November to enthusiastic response. Devon flew to New York quarterly to audit physical accessibility features. The Deaf Poet from Chicago created a signing storytime program that spread to 12 hotels across 3 countries. And slowly, methodically, the partnership between the Grand Whitmore and Sato Technologies became a model for how businesses could center accessibility without sacrificing innovation or profit. Ari turned 14 in March. She celebrated with pupusas at Rosa's, followed by cake with the advisory board via video call, followed by a quiet evening with her mother in their new apartment. A 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood with heat that worked all the time and windows that overlooked a small park. She'd finished her first year as Youth Accessibility Director with a performance review that made her cry and a raise that made Monica cry. She'd been interviewed by 3 major news outlets, invited to speak at 2 conferences, and offered consulting positions by companies that had watched the Whitmore partnership and wanted to replicate its success. And she'd learned that success wasn't a destination, but a process. The daily choice to show up, to listen, to build, to demand better, and to make room for the next person climbing the same mountain. One evening in late April, Ari returned to the Grand Whitmore lobby where it had all started. She sat in her old chair near the potted ficus, but this time she wasn't hiding. She was waiting for Emma, who'd asked to meet her there before their weekly project check-in. Emma arrived with her project notebook and a nervous expression. "I have an idea," Emma said, "but it's big. Maybe too big. Tell me anyway. What if we created a program where kids like me, kids whose parents work in hotels, could learn about hospitality and business and accessibility? Like an internship, but for younger kids, so we could see that these jobs are possible for us too." Ari felt something click into place, like a puzzle piece she hadn't known was missing. "That's not too big," she said. "That's perfect. Let's build it." They spent the next hour sketching out ideas, Emma's voice growing more confident as Ari asked questions and took her thoughts seriously. When they finished, Emma looked at Ari with something like awe. "Is this what you do all the time? Just make people's ideas real?" "Not quite. I help people make their own ideas real. There's a difference." "What is it?" "When you make someone's idea real for them, they stay dependent on you. When you help them build it themselves, they learn how to build the next thing without you. I'm not here to be the person with all the answers. I'm here to make sure everyone gets a chance to find their own answers." Emma nodded slowly, processing. "I want to do what you do when I grow up." "Then start now. You don't have to wait until you're older to build things that matter. You just have to start." That night, Ari sat at her desk in her own bedroom, her own space, with her own door that closed and walls she'd painted a soft blue, and opened her laptop. She pulled up the document she'd been working on for months, a proposal for the Sato Whitmore Youth Development Initiative, a comprehensive program that would provide mentorship, education, and career pathways for young people from underrepresented communities. Emma's idea would fit perfectly. Ari wrote until midnight, refining language and adding budget projections and crafting arguments that would convince boards and investors that investing in young people wasn't charity, it was strategy. The best ideas came from diverse perspectives, and diversity required intentional cultivation. When she finally closed her laptop, she looked around her room and felt something settle in her chest. This was her life now. Not the life she'd imagined a year and a half ago, sitting invisible in a hotel lobby, but the life she'd built by refusing to stay invisible, by walking through doors even when people said they weren't meant for her, by building bridges instead of walls. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sato sent from Tokyo where it was already tomorrow. Quarterly reports show accessibility features driving 23% increase in bookings and 34% improvement in guest satisfaction scores. The board is impressed. More importantly, guests feel welcomed. You were right. Accessibility is not burden. It is advantage. Well done. Ari smiled and texted back. We were right. This is what partnership looks like. She set her phone down and crossed to the window, looking out at Queens stretching toward Manhattan's glittering skyline. Somewhere in that city, there were other invisible people sitting in lobbies and stairwells and quiet corners, waiting for someone to see them, waiting for a door to open, waiting for permission to take up space in a world that told them they were too young, too poor, too different to matter. And Ari was going to spend the rest of her life making sure those doors opened, not just for her, but for everyone who came after. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Being seen wasn't a gift someone gave you. It was a right you claimed for yourself, and then fought to extend to everyone else. The invisible voice had found its power, and it was just getting started. Somewhere across the city, in another hotel lobby, another young girl sat with a library book and a broken backpack trying to disappear. But she wouldn't stay invisible forever, because Ari and people like her were changing the rules, opening doors, and building a world where everyone had a chance to be seen. One bridge at a time, one voice at a time, until invisible became impossible and every person knew their worth without having to prove it first. That was the future Ari was building, and it was going to be extraordinary.